Okay, let's begin this operational analysis. We're going to be looking at the advance on Oviedo, specifically covering the period from the 30th of August to the 9th of September. The main objective during this phase was, of course, to secure the primary approaches to the city.
Now, all of the intelligence for this briefing is drawn directly from the Spanish Civil War Battles Project. This was developed by Cavalry Colonel F.J. Victor Rodrigo.
Here's how we'll break it down. We'll start with the strategic context. Then we'll track the advance to the Nalón and Narcea rivers. After that, we'll analyze the reorganization of the front, the enemy's response, and finally, we'll wrap up with a snapshot of the overall situation as of September 9th.
Right, let's dive into our first section, the big picture, the strategic context for this advance on Oviedo. This map here lays out the area of operations for us. You can immediately see how the terrain dictates the approaches. All these roads create natural corridors, and they all converge on the capital, Oviedo. These were the only real routes the advancing forces could take. So, with that in mind, let's track the first phase of this operation, the push to the Nalón and Narcea rivers, which took place between August 30th and September 9th. This map gives us a really detailed, day-by-day look at how the advance unfolded. You can trace the individual columns as they move out. For instance, you have the coastal advance securing San Cosme, and then the main thrust pushing towards Salas. Now, one constant problem during this entire phase was enemy air power, which was continuously harassing the columns. And while they faced some pretty strong resistance, especially around San Cristobal, the objectives were, for the most part, steadily being taken. This timeline just goes to show you how fast things were moving. The whole thing kicks off on August 30th. Just 4 days later, Salas falls. By the 7th, key coastal towns like Pravia have been taken. And then, only 10 days after it all started, on September 9th, the columns reached their initial objective line, the Nalón and Narcea rivers. But here's where things took a critical turn. When the lead elements reached the rivers, they hit a major roadblock. The enemy had carried out a systematic demolition, destroying every single bridge in the sector. This brought the entire advance to a dead halt, forcing a complete tactical pause.
And that forced pause had huge consequences. Let's dig into how both sides used this time to reorganize, which led to what's known as the hardening of the fronts, basically a period where the fighting gets a lot tougher and the front lines become much more static.
Okay, so this map shows how the attacking forces adapted to the new situation. Colonel Martín Alonso reorganized his units for the final push. He tasked one group under Lieutenant Colonel de Miguel with a crucial job, protecting the long flank. At the same time, Alonso took direct command of the main columns himself, the ones that would form the spearhead for the attack on Oviedo.
And at this point, the forward elements of the Galician columns are now just 25 kilometers away from their primary objective. As the crow flies, that's all that separates them from the city of Oviedo.
But those last 25 kilometers were not going to be easy. Far from it. Enemy resistance was stiffening by the day. Their air power was becoming more and more effective, a serious problem. Enemy units even started infiltrating behind the front lines, creating havoc in the rear. On top of all that, enemy morale was actually growing. While inside Oviedo, the situation for the defenders was becoming absolutely desperate. The front was, without a doubt, hardening.
So, now let's flip the perspective. We've seen how friendly forces reacted. Let's take a look at the other side of the hill and analyze the enemy's response and how they reorganized their own forces on the Western Front.
The enemy's main response was to consolidate their command structure. Belarmino Tomás took over as supreme commander. And critically, they established a formal general staff, which was led by a foreign professional, Teodoro Zuputlitz. The specific front facing the advance was handed over to the command of Commander Linares Aranzabe.
So what exactly were they up against? Well, here's our estimated breakdown of the enemy forces. We believe Commander Linares had about 6 battalions at his disposal, somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 troops. What's really important here is that they held a significant advantage in artillery, with somewhere between 20 to 30 pieces. And their air power was under the command of Lieutenant Hernandez Franch.
And this leads us to what is perhaps the most critical factor in this whole phase. The enemy now had air superiority. With the arrival of up to 10 additional aircraft, they effectively controlled the skies. This was a game changer. It meant they could hammer the advancing columns on the ground and relentlessly pressure the besieged city of Oviedo from the air. All right, let's bring it all together now with a final summary, a strategic synthesis of the situation at the end of this 10-day period. So here's the bottom line on September 9th.
On one side, you have the Galician columns. They've reorganized, they're poised for the final assault, but they're up against increasingly tough resistance and constant air harassment. On the other side, you've got the Asturian forces. They're now under a unified command, their morale is high, and crucially, they enjoy local superiority in both artillery and air power.
So this really sets the stage for what comes next, and it leaves us with the key analytical question moving forward. With both sides reorganized and the front line solidified, what factors, be they logistical, tactical, or perhaps even morale, will ultimately prove decisive in the next phase of this campaign for Oviedo?
For those of you who want to do a much deeper dive on this campaign or any other operation of the Spanish Civil War, all the detailed information can be found at the source website you see on your screen. That concludes this briefing.